Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June meeting of the Wilmot Township Committee of Adjustment. I wish to apologize to everyone for the late start of this meeting with the technical glitch. I guess that can sometimes be expected in these difficult times that we're in. But again, my apologies for the late start. I'm not aware of anyone wishing to read the land acknowledgement agreement, so I will do so. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and to Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. I would like to introduce members of our committee. We have with us this evening Ms. Louise Lalonde and Mr. Peter Rowe. Also with us is Mr. Andrew Martin, who is the Economic Development Officer for the Township and the Manager of Planning, as well as our Secretary Treasurer. My name is Wayne Roth. We are an independent body appointed by Wilmot Township Council, and we have the power to make minor changes to existing zoning regulations and to approve some changes to existing non-conforming uses, as well as to give consent. Each applicant will be notified in writing of the decision within 10 days, and with that decision will be instructions on how it can be appealed. Any decision made by this committee can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal Council, who will then make a final and binding decision. If the decision on a minor variance or a consent, it will become final and binding after 20 days from the date of this meeting. The format of the meeting will be as follows. We will ask Mr. Martin to introduce each application. The applicant will then be invited to come forward and add any additional information if they choose to do so. Following this, anyone in the audience will have an opportunity to speak for and against the application. Committee members may then question the applicant and have their questions answered, and then the committee will make a decision. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary conflict of interest from committee members this evening? Seeing none, I will ask Mr. Martin then to introduce the first application.
Thank you. The first application, A1121, is made for a property at 3250 Herbs Road in Phillipsburg. This application proposes to reduce the front yard setback for a detached building as well as a fence to approximately 0.6 meters. The sketch attached to the report highlights the property. Essentially, the existing building at the corner is located over the property line. So the intent is to allow for a structure that is entirely on private property, but is closer than the typical setback, which is reflective of the current development on that site. The applicant has indicated that they've had concerns with individuals parking and attending that property without permission, and as such are proposing to construct a fence essentially from the new garage to the existing building to prevent access for non-invited guests. In order to ensure that adequate parking is provided on the property, an opening would be required to be provided. It could be gated, but provide access to a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces on the property. Through circulation of the application, there were no concerns raised. The structure has already been located on the property, and ultimately, should this application be approved, building permit would be issued, and then the structure would be reviewed to ensure compliance with the Ontario Building Code. The fence itself has not been constructed. It does not require a permit, but should this application be approved, then the fence could be constructed as well. Again, no concerns or comments were raised. No one has registered to attend this meeting. The applicant is in attendance to this meeting. And if there are any questions, I would be available to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Does the applicant wish to address committee on this matter? Mr. Martin, do you?
I'm not seeing them raise their hand at this point.
Okay.
So there is a raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. If you were to click that, if you want to speak, perhaps just give them a minute. I do see a hand raised, so I will add them to the meeting.
Okay. I'm not aware of anyone else in the general public that wishes to comment on this application.
That's correct. So the applicant is now added to the meeting. If they wish to speak, they can.
Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to give you the opportunity if you had any questions. That's so I don't need to speak. I just unmuted myself. If you need to address me, I'm here.
Okay. Of members of committee, do you have any questions of the applicant? Seeing none. Any comments or questions of Mr. Martin? Seeing none, then I would ask for someone to bring forth a motion to approve this submission. Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Mr. Rowe. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin, would you introduce the next application, please?
Yes. Next application is A1221. The address of the property being 1094 Bleems Road in Mannheim. This application proposes to recognize the size of an existing structure and to allow it to be used for an accessory dwelling unit or an additional dwelling unit detached. So the zoning bylaw allows for apartments to be created in both built the main dwelling as well as accessory structures. There are regulations applicable to that accessory structure with respect to height and area. This structure is larger than what would be required under a new build, but given that it exists on the property, essentially the idea of having someone within that structure or within a second story of the structure is something that's already permitted. Essentially, the only thing that's being contemplated whether it could be an apartment or not. The comments were received from two neighboring property owners, essentially just asking questions about the process. And one in particular concern was with respect to the status of that structure and whether it's actually safe for this type of occupancy. Should this application be approved, a building permit would be issued and the structure would be reviewed to ensure that it is suitable and adequately meets the requirements of the Ontario Building Code for that type of occupancy. The septic system as well is something that would be addressed through a permit. Both applications have been applied for. And again, should this application be approved, both the septic system and structure would be reviewed for compliance with the Ontario Building Code. Within the recommendation, the intent is that this applies to the existing building only. That would mean that voluntary demolition of this building wouldn't mean that it could be reconstructed. There are provisions within the zoning bylaw rather that allow for structures destroyed by natural causes to be reconstructed. So that provision would still apply, but down the road, essentially a voluntary demolition of this structure wouldn't mean that this building could be reconstructed in its same size and format. As well, only a portion of the building is being used for the apartment. So the recommendation only applies to 53% of the existing building, which basically represents the existing square footage that the unit within that structure is occupying at this point. The applicant and one other individual are in attendance, so they're when you provide that opportunity to speak, if they want to raise their hand, I will add them to the meeting and certainly can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Does the applicant wish to address committee, and is there anything further that you wish to add?
I'm not seeing a hand at this point, so I will make the assumption that the answer is no.
I'm assuming then that the applicant is satisfied with the report. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address committee on this matter? Do you see a hand, Mr. Martin?
I do not see a hand raised. No, there's no hands raised, so I think we're safe to
Okay.
proceed. No, yeah.
All right, okay, thank you for that. Members of the committee, any questions of the applicant or of Mr. Martin regarding this application? Seeing none. I then would ask for a motion to approve this submission, moved by Mr. Rowe, seconded by Ms. Lalonde. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Martin, would you introduce the next application, please?
Yes, so the last application at this meeting is submission B 0721. This deals with a property on Fairview Street in New Hamburg, 362. The application proposes to sever land as a lot addition to an adjoining property and to retain an easement over the lands to be conveyed to secure an existing sanitary sewer line that runs to the property. So that the sketch that's attached to the report illustrates the property. Essentially, there's a condominium development partially under construction at 362 Fairview Street. The owners of that property also own 81 Bleams Road West. And prior to the sale of 362 Fairview Street, whether it be the entire property or any units, they want to deal with the ownership of a small sliver of land that runs along 81 Bleams Road West that connects this Fairview Street property to Bleams Road West. The only issue that staff have raised is that there's an existing shed located on the lands to be conveyed, which essentially means the shed is sitting on top of an existing sanitary sewer. So we advise the applicant that that structure needs to be moved, and they're aware of that. And within the recommendation, there is a condition to ensure that prior to transfer that shed is relocated. Other than that, there were no other comments or concerns raised. There is no one in attendance at this meeting to speak to the application, but I'm certainly here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Mr. Martin, I have one question, but I'll ask members of the committee, any comments or questions of Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin, on the map, I can't quite locate the actual location of the shed. Is it closest to 362 Fairview? That little white rectangle, is that the shed?
Yeah, it's essentially on the it's right at where this strip of land, the end of it would meet the rest of 362 Fairview Street. Okay. So it's kind of a gray and white shadow that you would see there. Yeah.
It's part of the shaded in crosshatch section on the yeah. Okay.
Who's speaking? Is that
that was Peter.
That's Peter.
Huh? Pardon?
Peter is speaking.
Oh, okay. Peter, go ahead.
I was just verifying that was right at where the corner of the property line is and where the easement goes through.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. And Mr. Martin, did you say that 362 Fairview is going to be sold? Did you mention that?
I indicated that the applicant wanted to ensure that this land conveyance was dealt with before any sale were to occur. So I would assume at some point sale would be involved, but that's not critical to the application. It's
absolutely not. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much for that. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to comment? I assume there's not, Mr. Martin.
No, there's no one else in attendance.
All right, good. Thank you. Members of committee, any comments or questions further? If not, would someone then please bring forth the motion to approve?
Yes.
Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Mr. Rowe. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you very much. Last order of business is the approval of the May meeting. And would someone bring forth that motion? Moved by Ms. Lalonde, seconded by Mr. Rowe.
Well, I can't very well because I wasn't at that meeting.
Oh, well, I think you can still vote to approve the minutes, even though you weren't an attendee. correct, Mr. Martin? I
Okay.
think
I'm
I
certainly willing to,
I can make
That's
that.
correct. I mean,
there aren't
the
very
minutes,
many,
Yeah.
the minutes were circulated to all committee members and there were no concerns raised. So I think, yes, it's fair to say for the purpose
Good
of
enough.
moving the,
Okay, thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Now, can I have that vote now, please? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Do we have any, thank you all for contributing to our meeting this evening. And again, I apologize for the late start. Hopefully next month we'll get it going right at 7 o'clock. I'm sure we'll work at that. Mr. Martin, do you have a date or are there applications for July?
I don't believe we've received any applications yet, but I think there are a couple of the potentials that may be coming up. So tentatively, we would look at a meeting perhaps on July 7th.
Okay.
July 7th or the following week, depending on holiday conflicts. But
how it works out. All right. Well,
I will
leave
let you
that
know
to-
if there's applications and I'll reach out to you about a date.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Thank you all for contributing, and stay safe and stay healthy. Good
Thank
night,
you.
all.
Same to you all. Take care.
Okay.
Night.
Thanks.